Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Yesterday, some issues came to my light that a couple of students from uh, Titan Batch, they were saying that this is recorded lecture. Look, this is not recorded lecture. This is a live lecture. You can ask question from me, and all those who are right now on app, they can come and ask their questions on YouTube. And this arrangement will be there only for today. From tomorrow onwards, we will have regular classes on our app. So these 3 days classes were also to be to remain live on YouTube as well as on your app. So that is why, and since I can watch the comment only on YouTube, that is why app students were uncomfortable. So if you have any query, if you have any doubt, so please ask your comment on YouTube. You will be given ample opportunity, and from tomorrow onwards, demo class will end today. From tomorrow onwards, we will have regular classes on our app. Good morning everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. From tomorrow onwards, all those who are watching the lecture from app, they can come on YouTube, they can ask their questions. Your question will be entertained. From tomorrow onwards, it will take place only on app. This arrangement is only meant for today. So any doubt from last lecture, please let me know. In live classes, since I write extensively on the board, so Roshan, I would advise you that you keep on jotting down the points simultaneously, so that you will not have to work additionally for making notes. So simultaneously, when I keep on explaining things and I keep on writing on the board, you keep on writing in your notes also. So in that way, simultaneously, your notes would also be prepared, because I have this habit of writing down all the important things on the board itself, and then I explain things. That is my style of teaching. So in offline classes, the style differs a bit, but in online classes, that remains my style of teaching. In offline classes, it is less board work because the students are there in front of me, but in online classes, I focus on a lot of board work, and I keep on writing down on all the relevant point on the board itself. So it would be advisable for you if you keep on jotting down the points simultaneously, and later on when you will get the class PDF, and if there are certain additional points, those additional points can also be incorporated in your notes. So in that way, by the time we will finish Indian Polity, you would not have been done only with the note making, but you would have also been you would have also covered all the previous year's question paper, because previous year's question paper I will keep on discussing in the classroom itself for both prelims as well as mains. So that will give you that will give you enough idea about the kind of questions that can be asked in the paper, that has been asked in the paper, and it will also give you a lot of confidence. Okay, Manish is from Sankalp batch. Somebody is asking this question. Liberty, Reshma, liberty, yesterday I told you that liberty is the freedom to do what one thinks best for himself or herself, and it gives you an opportunity to develop yourself completely. It gives you an opportunity to develop your potential fully. But liberty does not mean license. Liberty means responsibility. I can enjoy my liberty if you will respect my liberty. Suppose you do not respect my liberty, then what will happen? There will be anarchy and chaos in society. So that is why we also discussed about the relationship between law and liberty yesterday. I told you where there is no law, there is no liberty. So if you have liberty to do whatever you think best for yourself, but you are not letting me enjoy my liberty, so this will completely defeat the purpose of liberty itself. Therefore, there must be enforcement of my liberty. If somebody infringes upon my liberty, if somebody violates my liberty, then there must be some punishment. So that is why it is being said that where there is no law, there is no liberty. Chaliye. Voice is not clear. I don't think there is any issue with the voice. I don't think there is any issue. Am I audible? Somebody was also asking question related to nation. What was the question? Am I audible? I don't think there is any issue with the voice. Harshita is from Titan 2.0. So there are a lot of my old students. Okay, is there any question related to nation also? If there is any question, you keep on posting your question. If there is any other query, any other question? Otherwise, we shall move forward. It may be due to I'm keeping mic closer to my mouth. That may be the reason that there is a small crack. I think now it is okay. Is there any other question? Please ask your question. Otherwise, we shall move forward. If there is any other question, please continue with it. Otherwise, we shall move forward. Any other question related to nation, country, state, liberty, law, and liberty? Then please let me know. No question? Shall we move forward? I also gave you the methodology to be adopted for classroom. We discussed about the methodology and I told you that the methodology, better methodology would be you attend classes, you go back to your study table, and when you go back to your study table, so you need to revise the whole thing that has been taught in the lecture. And then again you come back, and before coming back you read the class PDF, and once you are done with class PDF, you attend the next lecture. And then I told you that on weekly basis you keep on revising the things. So that is why I advise a student that initially you do not refer to a number of materials. Most of the students, they commit this mistake. Even in my optional paper I have seen that a lot of students, they keep on making this mistake. A lot of students, what do? They keep on referring to a number of materials initially. So in the initial days when you join a coaching, you should not be referring to too many materials. But students, out of enthusiasm, out of curiosity, and out of and due to their ambition that I want to clear this exam very soon, they keep on referring to a number of materials. So the more material initially you will refer to, it will leave you more confused. That is why I initially refer to only a couple of materials. Preferably only class notes, class PDF, and PYQs. Once you are comfortable with the subject, then I won't say that you should not be referring to any other material. You go and refer to material once you are comfortable with the subject. Initially, you should refer to only a couple of things. previous year's question paper, class notes, class PDF, I think that would suffice. But once you start understanding the subject, you have not only acquainted yourself with the subject, but you have also started understanding nuances of the subject, finer points of the subject. In that case, you can go and refer to a couple of more materials, but not initially. So, referring a number of material does not give you an extra edge. What gives you an extra edge? Whatever you are studying, whether you are able to internalize the things or not. Only when you are able to internalize the things, then only you become comfortable with the subject. So do not make this mistake of referring to a number of materials initially. Initially, you should stick to only a couple of things. Later on, once you become comfortable, you can expand your wings, but not initially. Lecture Shravani, it is due to the fact that lecture is simultaneously going live on YouTube. That may be the reason. Shravani, from tomorrow onwards, you will have live lecture on your app only. On app, there is an issue. There is an issue related to, because we are also having live classes on YouTube. So from tomorrow onwards, you will have your classes only on app. Don't worry. Act and law I have already discussed. Kutubuddin, I have already discussed act and law. That a bill passed by parliament, it goes to the president, and after presidential assent, it becomes an act. But just becoming an act does not mean that it has entered into the implementation phase. Once it enters into implementation phase, then only it can be termed as law. For example, Citizenship Amendment Act, it was passed by the parliament in 2019. The President of India gave his assent in 2019, and then Citizenship Amendment Act, it entered into the phase of implementation only in 2024 March, and then we can call it law. So there is very slight difference. When it enters into the phase of implementation, it becomes a law. Any other question? Adil has asked this question. In the definition of nation, we use the term culture. But nation by definition is something above. Yes, it is not only about culture. It is not only about culture. Culture is also one of the things. Culture is also one of the aspects. So nation is, do not get emotional, Adil, about the idea of nation. The idea of nation, it includes race, it also includes language, it also includes culture, it also includes your religion. I told you in the definition of nation itself that when you have a sense of oneness with one's own culture, people, religion, language, land, etc., that can be termed as nation. It means within the boundary of a state, you can have hundreds of nation. Hundreds of nation means if people are divided on the lines of religion, on the lines of ethnicity, on the lines of culture, on the lines of language, it means it is only a state and not a nation. A state becomes a nation when people inhabiting a particular territory start relating themselves with a particular identity. For example, the identity of being an Indian. But within the boundary of a state, if people do not relate themselves with the idea of a particular land, a particular country, then what happens? It means people are divided on different lines. So people may be divided on language. So if somebody is divided on language, then a particular linguistic group itself becomes a nation. If people are divided on the lines of religion, then it becomes a nation. The religious group itself becomes a nation. So within the boundary of a state, Adil, you can have hundreds of nations. Any other question? So you have got a bit emotional about the idea of nation, that it is something above one's own culture. It is something above your own culture only when People belonging to a particular territory, they associate themselves with one particular idea. For example, idea of India. If all of us are associating ourselves with one idea, that is idea of India, then it means the project of nation making for India has been completed. Adil. Pramodini, initially you cannot make entire polity notes in 30 pages. That will happen only after third or fourth reading. Initially it will not happen, so forget about it. Only when you will revise Indian polity at least 4 times, 3 to 4 times, then only you would be able to compress entire Indian polity notes in 30 pages. Otherwise, it will not be possible for you. So you forget about the things. Note making doesn't mean making extensive notes. Note making means whether you have been able to compress entire Indian polity in 25 into 2 or 30 into 2. That is an ideal note making, so that you can revise before your exam. Because 1 month before your exam, you will not be able to revise whole Indian polity if you do not have a 25 pages notes. Okay, Manish. Acha, what is his name? Chale. Yes, that is true. What is his name, Manish? Chale. Any other question? Any other question? So let us move forward. Okay, Vishal Dubey. So Vishal Dubey is okay. Vishal Dubey is from Agra, and Vishal Dubey was my online student or offline student. I have no idea. So you ask the Vishal to connect with me, because, and it is very surprising also. Okay, he got 296 rank. Very nice. Chaliye. Now let us move forward and let us discuss about, sometimes a student clear the exam but you are unaware about this. That is the fallout of online classes. That you're a student, have clear exam and you are still unaware about the things. Yesterday we discussed about basic concept. We shall continue with the topic. Today we will discuss an interesting topic from which a couple of times they've asked this question. Couple of times they've asked question related to rights. What do we mean by rights? Later on, when we will discuss fundamental rights, there also we will be discussing about rights. So, what do we mean by rights? So, rights are claims of individual against state. Got my point? Rights are claims of individual against state. And rights are something, claims of individual against a state, but any random claim of individual cannot be termed as a state. Remember, any random claim of individual cannot be termed as a state. So suppose you say that I want to own Delhi railway station. That cannot be termed as your rights. Suppose you say that I want to live in Prime Minister's residence. That cannot be termed as your right. So any random claim of individual cannot be termed as rights. When you say right, so right means claims of individual against the state. But claims of individual must get the recognition from society also. and then it needs to be enforced by a state, then only it can be termed as right. Got my point? I said that rights are claims of individual against state. Rights are claims of individual against state. Any random claim of individual cannot be termed as rights. So you want to live in prime minister's house, you want to live in presidential palace, that cannot be termed as right. You want to own Delhi railway station, that cannot be termed as rights. So obviously it means that claims of individual must not be random and must be justified. But how do you know that your claims are justified? You know that your claims are justified when your claims gets recognition from society. When claims of individual is recognized by society and when claims of individual is enforced by a state, when claims of individual is recognized by society and it is enforced by a state. So just because you are claiming doesn't mean that your claims are justified, and doesn't mean that your claims will be respected and accepted. You are claiming something and then your claim gets recognized by society also. Only when it is recognized by society, then only it can be enforced by a state. The state cannot give you random rights which is not recognized by society. A state cannot give you a right which largely society does not agree with the right. Even if a law is being passed giving you certain rights, and if society is not agreeing with the law passed by a state, it is not going to be successful. Got my point? So any claim of individual, it must get the recognition from larger society, and then it must be enforced by the state. Then only it can be called as rights in true sense of the term. For example, women enjoy equal rights in parents' property. So it is your claim. It has been given recognition by the society and it has been enforced by the state through law. And that is why today even women enjoy equal rights in father's property, in parents' property. Got my point? So any random claim of individual cannot be termed as rights. If it has to be called as right, it must get the enforcement by the state, one, and two, it must get the recognition from the broader society. For example, a case was going on in Supreme Court about same-sex marriage, if you remember. Case was going on in 2022 or 23, same-sex marriage. But same-sex, and Supreme Court was also saying that Supreme Court was in fact interested in recognizing the rights of gays, lesbians and bisexuals, transgender and quench in this regard. But same-sex marriage could not be given legal status in India. Why? Because Government of India conveyed this message before the court that even if a judgment is being passed by the court, even if the state passes a law in this regard, large larger society is not willing to accept same-sex marriage, and therefore Supreme Court deferred its decision. It happened in 2023 itself. Got my point? So I'm saying that just because you are randomly claiming something, it cannot be accepted by state. Only when broader society recognizes that okay, these are the rights, and then it is enforced by the state, then only it can be termed as rights. Otherwise, it cannot be termed as right. The example is same-sex marriage. Supreme Court, when hearing was going on in Supreme Court, so a lot of explanation, a lot of arguments were provided in Supreme Court. So additional Solicitor General presented an argument in the Supreme Court that people are saying that in the name of liberty, same-sex marriage should be allowed. Tomorrow, by using the same logic, people may say that even incest marriages should be allowed. Even brother and sister should be allowed to marry. Even father and daughter should be allowed to marry, or mother and son should be allowed to marry. I still remember this argument. So Chief Justice of India, he said that this is far-fetched. You are saying that in the name of liberty, tomorrow people will start demanding for same-sex marriage also. But Government of India conveyed this message before the judiciary that larger society is not willing to recognize same-sex marriage just yet. And therefore, the decision was referred by the Supreme Court. So just because you have passed a law, and if society does not agree with the law, it is not going to be implementable. It is not going to be implemented in society. So broader society must be in conjunction with, must be in consonance with the law passed by legislature. So any random claim of individual cannot be termed as right. If it has got to be termed as rights, it must get the recognition from larger society. Most of the members of society must be agreeing upon certain premises, and then it can be enforced by the state through law. That is why I said that no random claim of individual can be termed as right. One. Second, suddenly, abruptly, if a law has been passed by the legislature, doesn't mean that it will get the sanction from broader society and law is going to be successful. If a law is to be successful, it must get the recognition from broader society. That is why I said that rights are nothing but it is claims of individual against the state, and claims of individual must get the recognition by society and must be enforced by the state. So same-sex marriage decision was deferred by the court. Why? Because government argument was society is not ready, and therefore it should be deferred. Now, what is the relationship between rights and duties? Now, let us discuss about this relationship. Rights cannot last long without corresponding obligation. A relationship between rights and duties. Rights cannot last long without corresponding obligation. If you have got rights and if you do not have any duty to perform, what are duties? Duties are obligation of a member of society towards his fellow being. Remember, duties are nothing but duties are obligation of a member of society towards fellow being. For example, I have got certain duties towards you and you have got certain obligation towards me. When we walk on the road, when we drive on the road, we have got certain obligation towards other members of society. So you have got certain duties towards other members of society. Each member of society must perform their obligation towards each others. And then only society can run smoothly. Society can be run smoothly. So relationship between rights and duties. Rights cannot last long without corresponding obligation. If you have only rights and no duties, then what will happen? If you have only rights and no duties, it means that you do not have any constructive contribution with society. Suppose I have got only rights and no duties towards my towards fellow member of society. So it means I will have no constructive contribution with larger society. And suppose you have got only duties to follow and you have got no rights. In that case also, you will become like a subject. You will become like a slave, or if you are living in monarchy, then you will have only duties to follow and you will have no rights. So rights cannot last long without corresponding obligation. Without corresponding obligations, because rights and duties are part of the same coin, and rights cannot last long without corresponding obligation. Both are in complementary relationship. So when you perform your duties, you automatically get your rights. Got my point? So rights and duties both are part of the same coin. Rights and duties both are part of the same coin. Rights and duties are part of the same coin. When you get your rights, so when you perform your duties, you will automatically get your rights. They are both part of the same coin. Performance of duty will automatically give you your rights. So without performing duties, rights will have no meaning. Without duties, rights will have no meaning. You perform your duties and you will automatically get your rights. So without duties, rights will have no meaning. Rights cannot last long without corresponding obligation. Rights cannot last long without corresponding obligations. You perform your obligation, corresponding obligations. You perform your obligations and you will get your rights. So rights and duties both are part of the same coin. Without duties, rights will have no meaning, and rights cannot last long without corresponding obligation. So Indian tradition says that performance of one's duties will automatically give one's right. That is Indian tradition. In Western tradition, they focus more upon rights rather than duties, whereas in Indian tradition, we say that if somebody has performed his or her duties, they will automatically get their rights. For example, the one who takes care of his parents, Indian tradition, ancient Indian inheritance law used to say that you will get more share in father's property. Eldest son used to get more share in father's property as per ancient Indian inheritance laws, because in the absence of father, eldest son used to perform the duty of father for their younger siblings, for their younger brothers and daughters. He used to perform the role of a father. He used to perform the role of a provider. He used to sacrifice a lot, and therefore, the law of inheritance also said that eldest son will get more share in father's property. So rights cannot last long without corresponding obligation. If you have got rights and no duties, then it will have no meaning. If you have only right and no duties, then again it will become meaningless. You will have no constructive contribution with larger society. If you have got only duties to follow and no rights, again it will have no meaning. You will become like a slave, or as if you are living in monarchy. So rights and duties both are part of the same coin, both go hand in hand, both are corresponding to each other. So rights cannot last long without corresponding obligation. Now, what do we mean by duties? Duties are nothing. Duties are obligation of an individual towards their fellow being is called as duty. Everybody understood this concept? Please let me know. Hmm. Everyone understood this concept? Please let me know. If there is any doubt, please let me know. A couple of questions have been asked from this topic itself. The question was, in the context of India, which one of the following is the correct relationship between rights and duties? So, rights cannot last long without corresponding obligation. This question was asked then. Again, the meaning of rights have been asked in the paper. Which one of the following statement is correct? That rights are claims of the citizen against the state, claims of the state against the citizen, etc. Now, let us move on to a very interesting topic. The topic is about the definition of constitution. Bharat has asked this question. So, difference between rights and law. Well, law is something that makes your right enforceable. For example, you have got fundamental rights. So you have got fundamental rights, but if your fundamental rights cannot get enforced, later on we will discuss about fundamental rights. Then what is the meaning of fundamental rights? So it is the law that makes your rights enforceable. Bharat, rights are your claim against the state, but it is the law. Your claim against the state, but what if a state does not accept your claim? So your claim will have to be accepted by a state due to law. So law is something that makes your rights enforceable. Bharat. Any other question? Any other question? Please let me know. Yes, duties are adopted after 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. That became a part of constitution. It doesn't mean that duties had no meaning earlier, because in Indian society we place a lot of premium on the performance of duties. So in constitution it was given the position after 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. It doesn't mean that there was no duty earlier. It doesn't mean so. It was given a place under the Constitution of India after 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. Later on we will discuss about it in Fundamental Duty chapter. Naveen. Claims of individual against the state. You can make your claim before the state. Chali, any other question? Now we are moving forward with another important topic, that is constitution. So what is the meaning of constitution? What is the meaning of constitutionalism? What is the meaning of limited government? Constitution. What do we mean by constitution? What do you understand by constitution? At least 6 to 7 questions have been asked from these three topics itself. 6 to 7. Constitution, constitutionalism, and limited government. In fact, in the last couple of years, almost every year they have asked one question from this topic itself. Now, what do you understand by constitution? When I say constitution, the constitution is like a rule book, a guidebook to run the country. Suppose you forget about the constitution, you forget about the country constitution, country. You just look at an organization like Reliance. Now, Reliance is a very big organization in which lakhs and lakhs of people are working. It's close to $150 billion organization. It's a huge organization. But do you think that Reliance would have been able to run itself successfully without having something written somewhere? So there are more than 3 lakh employees in Reliance. And if no employee, if there would have been nothing written there how to run Reliance, what would have happened? Every employee used to think in certain way and they used to perform things in certain ways. They would not have been then working for the goals of Reliance. They would have been working for their self goals. So in order to run the organization successfully, Reliance needs to have a guidebook, a rule book for its employees. That is how finance department needs to work, how HR department needs to work, how procurement department needs to work, how board of director need to work, etc., etc. Then you look at an organization, relatively a new organization like PW, which has got 17,000-18,000 employees working for them. If there would have been no rule book to run the company, then if there would have been no rule book to run the country, no guidebook to run the company, then finance department used to think in certain ways, human resource department used to think in certain ways, facility department used to think in certain ways, management used to think in certain ways, and the ways of finance department, top management, academic department, facility department would have been different, and it would have made running the organization, running such a huge organization, extremely difficult and extremely challenging to be run successfully. Therefore, any organization needs a rule book or guidebook to run it successfully. Likewise, any country needs a rule book or guidebook to run it successfully. If there would have been no rule book in India, then how judiciary would function, how bureaucracy would function, how legislature would function. So neither legislature nor judiciary nor bureaucracy would be having any idea about running the country. They would have been running the country on the basis of a common sense. And do you think that such a country is going to survive? Obviously no. Such a country will never survive if there is no rule book. And if everybody is working, everybody is acting the way they like. The bureaucracy would have acted in certain way, judiciary would have acted in certain way, legislature would have acted in certain way. Therefore, to run the country successfully, therefore, to move the country forward, you need something to guide the people. And this something is the rule book, this something is the guidebook that is essential for running the country, which is referred to by legislature, executive and judiciary. So judiciary, while taking decision, look at the constitution. Bureaucracy, while taking decision, executive, while taking decision, they look at the constitution. Legislature, parliament and state legislature, to run the country, they look at the constitution. So everybody is looking towards the constitution. It is like a rule book, it is like a guidebook to run the country successfully. If there would have been no rule book, no guidebook, then how bureaucracy would have been able to take any decision? How parliament would have been able to pass any law? how judiciary would have been able to take any decision. Therefore, to run this country, we needed a guidebook. And this guidebook is called as constitution. So a constitution is nothing. Constitution is a rule book. Constitution is a guidebook. And since all other organs of the government, namely legislature, executive, and judiciary, they keep on referring to the constitution. So it means it is the supreme law of the country, because all other organs are referring to the constitution. That is why constitution is called as the supreme law of the country. Constitution is also called as the fundamental law of the country. Why? Because we know a political entity called India. We know a political entity that is capable of mobilizing resources for its people, that is having its own administrative and legal framework to run the country. Why? Because of constitution only. So this political entity called India is capable of mobilizing resources for its people due to constitution only. One. This political entity is having a number of organs like legislature, executive, and judiciary. So legislature is able to make law due to constitution only. Executive is able to implement laws due to constitution only. Judiciary is able to adjudicate laws due to constitution only. So Constitution of India, it acts as the supreme law of the land. Constitution of India is the supreme law of the country. Constitution of India is the rule book. Constitution of India is the guidebook. Constitution of India is something that everybody keeps on referring to. So you refer to Constitution of India, I refer to Constitution of India. So all the authorities are referring to Constitution of India, because if a law has been passed by legislature, ultimately the law must conform to the Constitution. If a decision has been taken by IAS officer, the decision must conform to the Constitution. If judiciary has taken a particular decision, it must conform to the Constitution. So everything must conform to Constitution. Therefore, in the absence of Constitution, neither legislature nor executive nor judiciary would have been able to take any decision. That is why we call Constitution as the supreme law of the land. So Constitution, it is a rule book. It is a rule book. Or guidebook. To run the country. It is a rule book or guidebook to run the country. It is the supreme law of the land. It is the supreme law of the land. It means supreme law of the land means everything must conform to the Constitution. All the customs and traditions must conform to the Constitution. 1. 2. All the laws passed by legislature must conform to Constitution. If they are not conforming to Constitution, they shall be called as unconstitutional and void by the judiciary. It means all customs and traditions must conform to the Constitution. Conform to the Constitution. Then laws passed by the Parliament must conform to the Constitution. Must conform to the Constitution. decisions taken by executive, decisions taken by executive or decisions taken by judiciary must conform to the Constitution. If they are not conforming to the Constitution, then they shall be called as unconstitutional and void. So they must conform to the Constitution. If they are not conforming to the Constitution, they shall be called as unconstitutional and void. So laws passed by the Parliament must conform to the Constitution. Decisions taken by executive must conform to the Constitution. Decisions taken by judiciary must conform to the Constitution. And all customs and traditions within the territory of India must conform to Constitution. Otherwise, if they are not conforming to the Constitution, if not conforming to the Constitution, they shall be called as Constitution. They shall be called as unconstitutional, called as unconstitutional and void. They shall be called as unconstitutional and void. So if they are not conforming to the Constitution, they shall be called as unconstitutional and void. All customs and traditions must conform to the Constitution. A constitution is also known as the fundamental law of the country. Now, what is the meaning of constitution being called as the fundamental law of the country? Constitution is also called as fundamental law of the country. Constitution is also called as fundamental law of the country. It means judiciary. It means legislature, executive and judiciary. Legislature, executive and judiciary. Judiciary, these are the three organs of the state. Three organs of the government, and they keep on referring to the Constitution while taking its decision. So if there is no Constitution, if there would have been no Constitution, they would not have been able to take any decision. Remember this fact. If there would have been no Constitution, legislature, executive and judiciary would not have been able to take any decision. So in the absence of Constitution, if there would have been no Constitution, legislature, executive and judiciary, legislature, executive and judiciary would not have been able to take any decision. Legislature, executive or judiciary, they would not have been able to take any decision. They would have been, today they are able to take a decision. Why? Because we have got a constitution. So legislature, while taking their decision, they keep on referring to Constitution. So a law passed by parliament must conform to the constitution. If it is not conforming to the constitution, it shall be called as unconstitutional and void. All the decisions taken by executive must conform to constitution. If it is not conforming to the constitution, it shall be called as unconstitutional and void. A decision taken by judiciary again must conform to the constitution. If it is not conforming to the constitution, it shall be called as unconstitutional and void. In the absence of constitution, neither legislature nor executive nor judiciary would have been able to take any decision, and it means India as a political unit, India as a political entity would not have survived in the absence of constitution. That is why we call it fundamental law of the country, because India as a political entity would not have survived in the absence of constitution. We are able to survive. Executive and all the organs are able to take decisions due to constitution only. So India as a political entity would not have survived in the absence of constitution. That is why we call constitution as the fundamental law of the country. So it is the supreme law of the country because everything must conform to constitution. It is the fundamental law of the country because everyone is deriving their powers to the constitution. If there would have been no constitution, then how judiciary would have taken any decision, how executive would have taken any decision, how legislature would have passed any law. So India as a political entity would not have been survived in the absence of constitution. Therefore, we call constitution as the fundamental law of the country. Everybody understood this concept? Yes, it is not an inert document. It keeps on changing with the passage of time. Everyone understood this concept? Any question? Surely. So now let us move forward. So what are the chief functions of the constitution? And remember, Constitution of India also contains the provision of amending the constitution. So there are also provisions relating to amending the constitution. It is also being given under the Constitution of India itself. That Constitution of India is not an inert document. Constitution of India can change its color, Constitution of India can change itself as per the demands of the time. So Constitution of India is not an inert document. So what are the chief functions of the Constitution? When we say Constitution of India, now what are the chief functions of the Constitution? chief functions of the Constitution is one, it provides us the ideology of the government. Two, it limits the powers of the government. So basically, what does Constitution of India do? Constitution of India, it limits the powers of the government. That remains the chief function of the Constitution. So it is due to Constitution itself that a legislature, executive or judiciary would not have been able to take any decision as they want, because the decision must conform to the Constitution. So one function of the Constitution of India is that Constitution of India, it limits the powers of the government. That remains the chief function of the Constitution. It must conform to the Constitution. If it is not conforming to the Constitution, so it is unconstitutional and void. So it limits the powers of the government. Constitution limits the powers of the government. It is due to Constitution of India that government has got limited power. Government has got very limited power due to Constitution of India only. Government cannot do everything as it wants. Government, while taking decision, must do so while taking into view Constitution of India, taking into account Constitution of India. So it means Constitution of India must be conformed by the government at all cost. It is Constitution of India that makes the government makes the government accountable. It is the Constitution of India that limits the powers of the government. So yes, Ganesh, that is true. So without Constitution, you forget about Constitution is rigid or not. We will discuss about all those things later on. So both law and act written in Constitution. You focus here. So I told you that Constitution of India, it limits the powers of the government. So government, executive and legislature, executive and judiciary, they need to act within the bound of the Constitution itself, within the boundary of the Constitution itself. They cannot go beyond the boundary of the Constitution. They got to work, they got to take decision within the boundary of the Constitution itself. So one of the chief functions of the Constitution is that Constitution of India, it limits the powers of the government, because legislature, executive and judiciary, they need to take into account Constitution of India while taking their decision. Now there comes another related concept. Name of the concept is Constitutionalism. An amazing concept. And this concept itself, it separates Indian Constitution from other countries, namely China, North Korea, etc. Remember that any country can have constitution. So be it India, North Korea, any country of the world has got a constitution. Do you think that any country of the world can be without constitution? No country of the world can be without constitution. Why? Because if an organization like Reliance and PW needs a guidebook, then you can well imagine about the scale of operation in a country. So a country cannot be run in the absence of constitution. It is almost impossible for any country to run itself in the absence of constitution. If there is no constitution, a country would not be able to run itself. If there is no guidebook, an organization would not be able to run itself. If there is no guidebook, then how PW would be able to run? How finance department of PW, how academic department of PW, how facility department of PW would be able to take any decision. So likewise, so it means that any country can have, any organization can have a guidebook. Likewise, any country can have a guidebook. So be it North Korea, be it China, be it Russia, United States of America, Iran, even Iran, which is a theocracy. Even Iran has got a constitution. So no country can be without constitution. Without constitution, it will become like a banana republic where there is no constitution. So everyone is doing things the way they want because there is no constitution to guide them. There is no constitution to derive their powers. So any country of the world can have a constitution. Without a constitution, a country would not be able to take any decision. It may have a different name. That is an altogether different thing. That it may have a different name. So in Iran, you may call it something else. In North Korea, you may call it something else. But any country needs to have a guidebook. But just having a guidebook or just having a constitution is not enough. So what if there is no limitations on the powers of the government? Then there is no meaning of a constitution. So any country of the world can have constitution, but not necessarily the constitutionalism, because constitutionalism is those values that limits the powers of the government, protects individual rights, establishes supremacy of the constitution. So basically constitutional spirit. So constitutionalism is nothing rather but those values of the constitution that limits the powers of the government, protects individual rights, establishes supremacy of the constitution, etc. So any country of the world, any country can have constitution, but not necessarily any country can have constitution, but not necessarily constitutionalism. Constitutionalism. So any country needs a rule book or guidebook. A rule book or guidebook to run the country. Any country needs a rule book or guidebook to run the country, be it China, North Korea, India, etc. Any country needs a rule book or guidebook to run the country, be it China, North Korea, India, etc. But not every country, not necessarily every country needs to have a constitutionalism, but not constitutionalism. So constitutionalism, what do we mean by constitutionalism? Constitutionalism entails those values of constitution, those values of constitution that A, limits the powers of the government, limits the powers of the government. 1. 2. Protects individual rights. C. Safeguard individual liberty. Safeguard individual liberty, etc. So these are the values that are called as constitutionalism. So any country can have constitution, but not necessarily constitutionalism. Because any country can have constitution, as I told you that without constitution, a country would not be able to take any decision. So if there is no constitution, it is impossible for a country to take any decision. That is why even North Korea has got a constitution. Even India has got a constitution. China has got a constitution. So without constitution, without a rule book, without a guidebook, it is impossible to run a country. Therefore, any country can have constitution, but not necessarily those values that limits the powers of government, that protects individual rights, that protects individual liberty. Therefore, constitutionalism is something which is found in very few countries. Constitutionalism is something which is grounded in those rights of people that cannot be separated under any circumstances. So constitutionalism, it is grounded, these values are grounded in the inalienable rights of people. These values are grounded in the inalienable rights of people. These values are grounded in the inalienable rights of people. That is, those rights of people that cannot be snatched away under any circumstances. Those rights of people that cannot be snatched away, that cannot be snatched away under any circumstances. That is why we call these rights as inalienable rights. Under those rights that cannot be snatched away under any circumstances. So those values are grounded in the inalienable rights of people. That is, those rights of people that cannot be snatched away under any circumstances. So idea of constitutionalism, it limits the powers of the government. It includes democratic government. So constitutionalism per se as a concept, constitutionalism, it includes one, democratic government. Two, rule of law. Three, protection of individual rights, of individual rights. Then protection of liberty. Equality before law, equal protection of the laws, limited government, etc. Even equality before law, limited government, limited government, equality before law. Then a couple of more points can be added here. Even principle of natural justice, all these things that limits the powers of government are part of constitutionalism. That is why I said that any country can have constitution, but not necessarily constitutionalism. Constitutionalism as a concept, it contains those values of the constitution that limits the powers of government, protects individual liberty, safeguard individual rights, and these values are grounded in the inalienable rights of people, that is those rights of people that cannot be snatched away under any circumstances. So basically constitutionalism, it includes limited government, democratic government, rule of law, equality before law, principle of natural justice, then protection of individual rights, protection of individual liberty, etc., etc., etc. So these are constitutionalism. सारे बच्चों को ये point, everybody understood this concept. Everyone understood this concept? Please let me know. Even independent and impartial judiciary is a part of constitutionalism only. So all the good things related to constitution, all the good things which you can think of is a part of constitutionalism. Simple. All the good things is eventually a part of constitutionalism only. Sir, what about Russia and USA means? Already likha hua hai. The answer is there. Someshwari. Constitution is a document. Constitution is a rule book or guide book. I have already mentioned everything on the board itself that any country can have constitution, Someshwari, but not necessarily constitutionalism. So you can have a constitution like North Korea. Even North Korea and Russia have got a constitution, have got a rule book to run the country, but not necessarily constitutionalism, because constitutionalism includes those values that are grounded in the inalienable rights of people. That is, rights of people cannot be snatched away under any circumstances. That is why I said that constitutionalism, it involves democratic government, protection of liberty, protection of individual rights, rule of law, independent judiciary, limited government, equality before law. These features are not present in North Korea, not present in China, but these features, these values are present in India. So that is the major difference between constitution and constitutionalism. Constitutionalism, constitution is a document, and constitutionalism are values. Remember, constitution is a document and constitutionalism is a value. Someshwari, answer of your question. Constitutionalism is a value, whereas constitution, it is a value. Value that are not necessarily to be found. That are not necessarily to be found. Someshwari, answer of your question. Not necessarily to be found in all the countries having constitution. All the countries having constitution. Whereas constitution is a document. Whereas constitution is a document. Remember this fact. Constitution is a document. Mm, no, not implementing constitution. Even North Korea has got a constitution, Roshan. Even North Korea and China have got a constitution. So implementing constitution is not called constitutionalism. Constitutionalism are a rare virtue. Constitutionalism is a rare value. You will not find constitutionalism in every country having constitution. No, it's a value. There is a difference between value and ideology. These are two different things. Values are standards of desirability. That is what is worthwhile and what is not. Hmm. Kiran has asked this question. Constitution gives power to government, but the power is limited by constitutionalism. Yes, very nice. You understood the concept. Very nice. Kiran says Constitution gives powers to the government, but this power is limited by constitutionalism. Very nice. You have understood it. Hmm. Any other question? If you have understood this question, this concept, it means now you have started understanding Indian polity. Any other question? Now let us move on to another topic, that is limited government. What do we mean by limited government? What do we mean by limited government? Limited government is an aspect of constitutionalism only. Because I told you that any country can have constitution but not necessarily constitutionalism. For example, in China, a state has got enormous amount of power. State has got unlimited powers in China. Whereas in case of India, a state has got very limited power. So in India, a state has got limited power. In USA, even a state has got limited power. Just today, I came across one proposal of Donald Trump. Donald Trump said that I'm going to establish a government of efficiency, and two persons will be in charge of government of efficiency: Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. He said that it will be a moment of reckoning for United States of America. That inefficient bureaucracy will be weeded out. So inefficient bureaucrats will be weeded out of the system. Government will cut down on spending. Government will try to cut down on pilferage. And we also need to reduce excess bureaucracy. So there will be no tyranny of unelected bureaucracy in United States of America henceforth. And it is a moment of reckoning. It is the most important job to be done in United States of America today that must be completed before 250th year celebration of 250th year of American War of Independence. That is 4th June 26, 2026. So American War of Independence happened in 1776. So basically everybody is talking about limited government. Now what is the meaning of limited government? Limited government means a government whose power is limited. Limited government is a government whose power is limited. Power is limited by whom? Power is limited by the Constitution. Power is limited by the values of Constitution, that is constitutionalism. So even Supreme Court in Rameshwar Prasad versus Union of India case very clearly stated that limited government and constitutionalism both are inherent features of Indian Constitution. So Limited government means a government whose power is limited by the constitution, whose power is limited by the constitution. Limited government is a government whose power is limited by the constitution. First, point number one. A government whose power is limited by the constitution, it means there are limitations on the exercise of powers by the government. It means there are limitations on the exercise of powers by the government. There are limitations on the exercise of powers by the government. Limited government. There are limitations on the exercise of powers by the government, and this government is bound by constitution. This government must respect inalienable rights of people that cannot be snatched away under any circumstances. So government cannot take unreasonable. The government cannot take unreasonable or reasonable, arbitrary and fanciful decisions. Government is the actions of government are bound by the constitution. So government cannot take any unreasonable decision, any arbitrary decision, and any fanciful decision. Any such decision taken by government which is arbitrary, unreasonable and fanciful, it shall be called as unconstitutional and void. The powers of government are bound by the constitution. Government's power is grounded in the inalienable rights of people. It means the powers of government, the powers of people, it cannot be taken away under any circumstances. And then I told you that a government whose power is limited by the constitution, and there are limitations on the exercise of powers by the government. Government cannot take unreasonable, arbitrary and fanciful decision, and the actions of government are bound by the constitution. So it is constitution that places a boundary on the actions of the government, on the powers of the government. And in Rameshwar Prasad versus Union of India case, the Supreme Court very clearly states that both constitutionalism and limited government are an inherent feature of Indian Constitution. Even Supreme Court has reiterated that Constitution of India advocates a limited government. Constitution of India does not advocate an unlimited government in case of India. So in case of India, it is a limited government. Constitution of India very clearly says. The Supreme Court in Rameshwar Prasad versus Union of India case, the Supreme Court in Rameshwar Prasad versus Union of India case, very clearly stated, very explicitly or clearly stated that constitutionalism and limited government and constitutionalism are inherent part of, and constitutionalism are inherent part of Indian Constitution. It means that government cannot exercise unlimited powers. Government's power is limited. Both constitutionalism and limited government are inherent part of the constitution that must be respected by the government under all circumstances. And these two concepts are also essential for healthy functioning of democracy. So they are essential. They are essential for healthy functioning of democracy. Functioning of democracy. So that's the story so far. Everybody understood this concept? Please let me know. If there is any doubt, please let me know. Yes, Ganesh, that is true. Yes. Department of Government Efficiency is a concept first coined by Elon Musk. I think Government of India should also have a Department of Efficiency because of excess bureaucracy and because of irritating works done by bureaucracy. Government of India should certainly have a Department of Efficiency. This is what I truly believe. Because there are a number of decisions that are being taken by Government of India, and those decisions that are taken by Government of India is sometimes not even in the interest of the people. Therefore, I truly believe that we also need to have something like Government of Efficiency. There are government departments where only corruption is going on. There are government departments where corrupt officials, they are acting as a leech and they are harassing honest citizens. We need to have these things. Corruption is rampant everywhere in India. In every government department you go, officials, they just try to extort people at any cost. Yes, that is true, Bharat. Any other question? In India, in some government department, there is a very sorry state of affairs, and very unfortunate also. So we also need to have something like Government of Efficiency in India. Someshwari, government constitution takes limited PN government. I did not get your point. Did not get your question. Please paraphrase it. I did not get your question. Government takes limited PN government, I could not get your point. Any other question? Now let us move on to a new topic, that is types of constitution. Okay. Limited constitution takes. Yes, it is constitution that puts, rather constitutionalism puts limitations on the powers of government. Not constitution, rather constitution. But those values that puts limitations on the powers of government. In fact, even constitution has got the work to stop government from taking unreasonable decisions. Yes, that is true, Trusha. That is true. Yes, Pooja, that is true. The constitution puts limitations on the powers of government. Any other question? If there is no question, then we should move forward on topic like another important topic and interesting topic, that is types of constitution. Hmm. Okay. Types of constitution. Types of constitution. Now, what do we mean by types? So how many types of constitution do we have? The types of constitution: one, the written constitution, unwritten constitution; the rigid constitution, flexible constitution; federal constitution, unitary constitution. One, written constitution, constitution, and unwritten constitution. Unwritten constitution. Two, federal constitution and unitary constitution. And unitary constitution. Written constitution, unwritten constitution, federal constitution, and unitary constitution. Now, what do we mean by written constitution and what do we mean by unwritten constitution? A written constitution is the one whose provisions are written and codified in a single legal document. Now, what is the meaning of codification in a single legal document? Now, before understanding this term codification, do you remember that during your school days, there must have been provided something in a school canteen or in playground, a code of conduct written by your school administration, that the way you should be behaving in a school canteen or the way you should be behaving in the playground. During your school days, you must have come across such instructions given by school. So it is a code of conduct that is expected for all the students to follow. So it is a written constitution means codified. Codified means what? Codified means logically written. So whenever a country has suddenly come into existence. Whenever a state has suddenly come into existence, it needs a constitution to run the administration. Got my point? Suppose a country was always free. A country was always free. In that case, they do not need to make a written, they do not need to have a written constitution. A written constitution is something in which the provisions of constitution have been codified into a single legal document that can be referred to in case of any conflict. It means that everything has been written in the constitution in very logical and cogent manner. Everything has been written in the constitution in logical and sequential manner. It means if there is any conflict, you can always refer back to the constitution. If there is any conflict, then obviously what is written in the constitution will be accepted as truth in case of any conflict. So a written constitution is the one whose provisions have been codified into a single legal document. Codified means have been written logically in a single legal document that can be referred to in case of any conflict between constituents, any conflict among constituents, or for any type of conflict, you can refer to these legal documents that have been codified. So, for example, Indian Constitution is a codified document. Indian Constitution is a codified document means all its provisions have been written in a single legal document. Got my point? All its provisions have been written in a single legal document under the Constitution of India. So, written constitution. Its provisions are written. Provisions are written in provisions are written, or rather codified. Better word, provisions are written or provisions are codified. Are codified in a single legal document. Single legal document. Now, what is the meaning of codification? Codification means provisions are written provisions means clauses in clauses in a particular law. So provisions are written in a logical and sequential manner. Logical and sequential manner. For example, Indian Constitution is codified. It means provisions are written. Indian Constitution has been divided into different parts. In one part, one thing has been written. So part 1, Union and its territories. Part 2, citizenship. Part 3, fundamental rights. Part 4, directive principles. Part 4A, fundamental duties. Part 5, executive, etc. So in Indian Constitution, provisions are written in a logical and sequential manner. For example, Indian Constitution is divided into different parts. Indian Constitution is divided into different parts, and each part contains one major subject. Each part contains one major topic or subjects. For example, part 1, in part 1 you have union and territories. Part 2, you have citizenship. Part 3, you have fundamental rights. Part 4, you have directive principles, etc. So its provisions are written in a logical and sequential manner. So provisions are written and provisions are codified into a single legal document. But why have provision been codified into a single legal document? So that you can refer to those provisions in case of any conflict. That is why it has been codified into a single legal document that can be referred to in case of any conflict. Referred to in case of any conflict. So you can refer to these provisions in case of any conflict. Now there comes this very obvious and very logical question, that when provisions are codified, that is logically arranged in a sequential manner, it means it must have been a part of planned process. That is why all the provisions have been provided in a logical and sequential manner, because uh, Indian Constitution is a part of planned process. Point number 1. Point number 2, since all its provisions are codified, that is provided in logical and sequential manner, it means that it must have been prepared under the supervision of a constituent assembly. It must not have been a product of any random decision making. So a written constitution is always a part of planned process. Always remember, a written constitution is always a written constitution is a result of planned process. A written constitution is an enacted constitution. It means enacted constitution. Now, what do we mean by it is an enacted constitution? It means that provisions of written constitution have been, it means provisions of a written constitution have been enacted constitution. It means that provisions of written constitution have been written under the supervision of a constituent assembly. Under the supervision of constituent assembly. Constituent Assembly means a body that is responsible for a body that is responsible for debating, discussing, and deliberating upon, and then finally give a constitution to a country. So, Constituent Assembly, a body responsible for debating, discussing, and deliberating upon, discussing, and deliberating, and then finally giving a constitution, and then finally giving a constitution. Simple. So, a written constitution is a result of a planned process. It is an enacted constitution, and provisions of a written constitution have been written under the supervision of Constituent Assembly. It is a body responsible for debating, discussing, and deliberating upon, and then finally giving a constitution. So, Indian Constitution was adopted on 26th of November 1949. Agar Indian Constitution, if you look at Indian Constitution, so Indian Constitution was finally adopted on which date? So Indian Constitution was adopted on 26th of November 1949 and finally commenced on 26th of January 1950 and commenced on 26th January 1950. Now, what is the meaning of adopted on 26th of November and commenced on 26th of January? Adopted means a part of Indian Constitution came into force for the first time on 26th of November 1949. But Indian Constitution and all its provisions finally came in full force only on 26th of January 1950, the day on which Republic Day is celebrated in India. So any written constitution is a part of planned process. It's a part of deliberation for a very long time, and it is always an enacted constitution. So an enacted constitution is the one that is being prepared under the supervision of Constituent Assembly. Constituent Assembly is a body that is responsible for debating, discussing, and deliberating upon various provisions of the Constitution and then finally giving the country a constitution. So, Indian Constitution is a result of a planned process. It was prepared under the supervision of Constituent Assembly, and some part of Indian Constitution it came into force on 26th of November 1949. An Indian Constitution came into full force. Commencement of Indian Constitution happened only on 26th of January 1950. Everybody understood this point? Written constitution? Yes, that is true, Dhruv. That the setup in India, bureaucratic setup in India, has truly become a roadblock in our development and inefficiency. There is a lot of inefficiency, there are a lot of corruption, challenges, etc. We need to do something about it. Yes, we will discuss about it, Ravindra. Not today, but tomorrow. Hmm. My sister lives in Harshita. My sister lives in Guntur. So, in a way, I'm also from a Telugu state. She lives in Guntur. Hmm. Any question? Everybody understood this concept, written constitution? If there is any doubt, please let me know. So now we shall wind up the session now. From tomorrow onwards, we will have class on our app only. Yes, we are winding up now. We are winding up. Our written constitution, America, is an example of written constitution. Thank you, Harshita. Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shikhar, Harshita, Dhruv. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. So let us wind up the session and meet tomorrow. So that's all for today. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Roshan, Someshwari, Pooja, everyone. Thank you. Our topic is types of constitution. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you.